broader project on English medium instruction at university, a study focused on interaction in content lectures, EMI-Uni for short, led by Professor David Lasagabaster here from the University of the Basque Country. And a little word about me. Well, after Mark's introductions, there are very little things to add. So I'm an assistant professor here at the University of the Basque Country, but I'm specialized in ESP, EAP teaching for undergraduate students of the degrees of engineering and business management and administration. If you would like to find out more about me, well, here I leave you some contact details. So here is the overview of my talk. Well, after background that I will give you on EMI in Spain and specifically in the Basque Autonomous Community where I'm located, I will talk about motivation, anxiety, and classroom interaction in EMI. So I'll share with you my own research, and then I will focus on some possible qualitative methodologies that you might find useful in your own studies, and which I find really, really needed in our research on EMI. And then I'll finish up my talk with some key takeaways and questions to consider, and some references. So just to give you some background, in the Spanish context of higher education, EMI is viewed as the cornerstone of the internationalization process. And here, as well as in the other contexts, EMI has mushroomed since more or less 2010, with most universities offering bilingual programs at undergraduate or graduate level. Even though EMI has gained in popularity in Spain, the figures are still far behind those in other European countries, such as Netherlands or Denmark, for example. And a point to consider here, and then I would like to emphasize, is that over 40% of Spanish citizens live in officially bilingual areas where Catalan, Basque, or Galician are co-official languages. So that means that in these areas, compulsory education is provided in at least 3 languages: the 2 local languages, so Spanish and the local language, plus English. So this means that for over 40% of Spanish citizens, that the 41% of Spanish citizens live in bilingual areas with English as actually L3, not an L2. And to offer a bit of background about the Basque Autonomous Community where I'm located, here the only public university is the University of the Basque Country, UPV-EHU for short, so it is Euskal Herriko Unibertsitatea in Basque, right? It currently has over 45,000 undergraduate and graduate students and 5,600 lecturers and researchers, more than 60% of whom are qualified bilingual teachers in Basque and Spanish, while 1,330 more or less are accredited to teach in English. So they do have a certification awarded by the university or other organism or other institution, equivalent to a C1 level of the Common European Framework for reference for languages. Nowadays, more than 800 subjects are taught in English at our university, and 21 master's programs are entirely or partially delivered in English. Some 340 courses are the so-called English-friendly courses, which are delivered in Spanish, but also include their teaching guide and program outline in English. And these courses are aimed at international students taking part in exchange programs who have some command of Spanish, but prefer to use English in some particular situations, such as an exam, because they do not feel proficient enough to carry it out successfully in Spanish. And our university has also designed a plan to offer EMI subjects in various degrees, amounting to 30 credits, so that students have the necessary number of courses to earn an EMI mention in their specialization. And it is interesting to note here that the degrees with the highest number of EMI courses offered are the ones where there is a lower number of ESP or AAP courses. And the conclusion to be drawn is therefore that the spread of EMI has somehow pushed ESP out. And one of the risks that the rapid spread of EMI entails is that university authorities and those in charge of designing the different degrees believe that by simply exposing students to EMI courses, ESP will be learned by mere exposure. And in a similar vein, actually, research has recurrently shown that EMI lecturers focus their classroom discourse almost exclusively on content, while any language-related episodes tend to be related to comprehension breakdowns. And as a result of this widespread teaching practice, EMI students receive very little ESP support and are usually left to work out the rules of the subject discourse by themselves. And And no matter the context, EMI students deal with a double challenge as they are required to develop simultaneously their discipline-specific knowledge and linguistic competence in English to understand and process this knowledge adequately. As McKinley recently noted, the definition of EMI should rather reflect its history of acknowledged linguistic challenges, and thus he proposed that it integrate an English for specific academic purposes aspect. Hence, EMI should be rather understood as the teaching of academic content through English in settings where other languages have traditionally been used as mediums of instruction with an intention, stated or unstated, of developing learners' skills for using English for specific academic purposes. And as a matter of fact, improving English language skills has been regarded as the main reason for students enrolling in EMI courses. So they identified it as a key benefit, the improvement of L2 proficiency. However, such ESAP linguistic component is often overlooked in EMI courses, as university lecturers seem to ignore the linguistic dimension when delivering content in English, claiming that they are not language teachers. And this might affect students' expectations and motivation and intensify their anxiety when interacting in a foreign language. And the neglect of language objectives in EMI is widespread, not only in Spain, probably, and might be related to the paucity of specific training for lecturers in the EMI. And the significance of teacher education in EMI has also been underscored by some meta-analysis by Lasagaster and Fernandez Costales in 2003 or Macaro et al. In 2018 that identify collaboration between language and content lecturers and the importance of the provision of professional development programs as key issues that still require empirical evidence. And some other critical elements here include the competencies and certification processes of EMI lecturers, teachers' L2 proficiency, and more specifically, the use of interactive meta-discourse markers by EMI lecturers. Although in Spain we haven't reached yet the point in which EMI courses are considered requirement to graduate, as in some other contexts, like see, for example, Japan, local students' classroom-related anxiety and motivation should be borne in mind. Although EMI is a burgeoning avenue of research and motivation is crucial in second language learning, there's a paucity of studies analyzing the impact of English taught programs on the affective factors of university students. And which basically merits greater research interest. And in some contexts, the learning environment in EMI was found so harsh that it hindered students' motivation and heightened the anxiety. In this scenario, student interaction in EMI deserves further attention as the interplay between students' interaction, anxiety, and classroom interaction is students' motivation, anxiety, and classroom interaction in this setting has not yet been explored. This is because within EMI research, lecturers, as the key agents in the implementation of EMI courses, have received more attention than the students. So we will focus on the students in this talk. Okay. So to address this gap, together with my colleague from the University of Oviedo, I mentioned before, Alberto Fernandez Costales, we looked at motivation and anxiety of 31 undergraduate students enrolled in EMI courses at 2 Spanish universities, ranging from they were enrolled in courses ranging from the humanities to hard sciences. So here we had students from chemistry, computer science, electrical and mechanical engineering, and history. We aim to analyze the interplay between classroom interaction in EMI and these two affective factors, so motivation and anxiety. And the study aims to reach a better understanding of the driving forces to engage in English programs at tertiary level, and assessing the extent to which motivation and anxiety affect such engagement. It took a qualitative approach using focus groups to collect the data. I will talk about these methods a little bit more in detail in the forthcoming slides. We drew from Durney's L2 motivational self-system framework. And our study set out to explore what drives EMI students' motivation in terms of their ideal and ought to L2 selves, what effect does studying EMI have on their classroom-related anxiety? And last but not least, what do students think about their learning experience and classroom interaction? So, as I have already mentioned, we had 31 undergraduate students. They were aged 18, 19. So all of them, the majority of them were from the first years, apart from the computer engineering students who were in their second year of the degree. And their self-reported English proficiency was from B2 C1, with a couple of participants claiming a C2 level of competence, level of proficiency. We had 6 focus groups, 4 at the University of the Basque Country and 2 with the students from the University of Oviedo. And our focus groups lasted from 40 to 60 minutes on average. And we used a guide including 35 questions based on adapted from other studies, with items targeting their ideal and ought to L2 self, their L2 learning experience and classroom interaction in EMI, intended effort to learn EMI subjects or the motivational intensity, and the EMI-related anxiety they experienced based on the foreign language classroom anxiety scale adapted from Horvitz et al., which comprise such dimensions as communication apprehension and interaction in EMI, test anxiety, and fear of negative evaluation, for example. Regarding the setting of the study, the majority of the EMI courses at our universities are semestral, comprising 60 in-class study hours, usually in groups of around 20 students. So we are quite privileged in terms of EMI settings. Although teachers are not specifically trained in EMI, they have the opportunity to receive some courses on pronunciation and discourse organization in English. So they do have some in-service courses voluntarily. They volunteer to have those courses, but they are not obligatory. And the majority of the instructors who taught the students involved in the present study had 2 to 3 years of experience delivering EMI classes. And the courses, as I have already mentioned, are not compulsory for students, and they choose to enroll in these subjects voluntarily. Okay, and one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that the instructors are required to have C1 level, at least, of English command to be able to teach EMI courses. And with this research, we intended to also to further develop the line of inquiry initiated by my colleagues at the University of the Basque Country, Aintzane Doiz and David Lasavaster, 2018, who examined the L2 motivational self-system of teachers and students enrolled at our university, and who took as well a qualitative approach to test, to explore these motivations. Okay, so as I have already mentioned, this study took exclusively qualitative methodology, which is exploratory in nature and includes open-ended data collection in natural settings to provide insider's perspective, and is less common in research in general and really rare in EMI related research. So my role here today is to encourage you to take on more qualitative methodology in EMI related research. What we did, as I told you, is focus groups, interviews, and data gathered through those focus groups were transcribed, yielding a corpus of over 33,000 words. The corpus was then analyzed by both researchers following the approach proposed by Strauss and Corbin and used in previous studies in the field, like, for example, in the study in the work of Kojima in Japan. So first, the units of meaning were identified in the transcripts and coded. Second, concepts were created to describe each code, and only the concepts relevant to the study were taken into consideration. Then third, concepts sharing similar meaning were grouped into broader categories related to the motivational components under scrutiny in the current study, that is, ideal and L2 selves, EMI-related anxiety, and learning experience and classroom interaction in EMI. In case of any disagreement, steps 2 and 3 were repeated until a consensus was reached. And our analysis yielded 235 concepts, which were grouped into 12 categories belonging to ideal L2 self, L2 self, EMI-related anxiety, or a classroom-related EMI classroom interaction and learning experience in EMI. So let me now walk you briefly through the analysis, okay, through the results. This is what we have for ideal and L2 self. So you'll see here is that students identified like 3 key issues concerning English being essential in their lives, but not, without any sense of obligation. That's why, like, it's initially promotion-oriented motives were shown to be like totally internalized by them. Now I'll show you an example of what they mentioned, what the students actually mentioned. So here in the ideal to self, we identified 3 categories, which referred to interacting in English being essential in the professional sphere of each student, in the academic sphere, or in the private sphere. Okay, so they identified clearly the need for English, the need for being able to interact in English fluently as essential for future work opportunities, as an important asset for the future and for communicating internationally. Then for the academic sphere, they identified the benefits of English for academic records in the language certifications in academic career, broadly speaking. And they also identified being able to interact fluently in English as essential in their private sphere, such as traveling, entertainment, and personal growth. So just to give you an example here, you have an excerpt of a student from computer engineering. So she would say, like, learning English is something natural to us. You take it for granted. It's essential. I think that not only does it open doors regarding where you can travel, with whom you can talk, or how you can communicate, but also if you speak English a lot, it changes your way of thinking. It opens your mind. Okay, so you can see no sense of obligation in such comments. Although they did mention some of the issues related to being forced at the beginning to learn English by their parents, so parental pressure in the childhood, but then regarded it as a part of their own wishes or needs, right? So there were a few comments about interacting in English being an obligation, like being an obligation nowadays. So they were like forced by today's society to be fluent in English, or to have been forced as kids to learn English, but now it's a part of their own identity. Now, regarding anxiety, we find an interesting aspect is that more comments were about lack of anxiety, actually. So they did mention communication apprehension, but rather related to speaking in public, anxiety related to speaking in public as a personality trait. And it was regardless of the degree they were enrolled in. So they would mention some things related to speaking in public in general, or giving presentations in general, regardless of the language they were using, not EMI specific. Okay, so they did mention a little bit of anxiety and feeling uncomfortable when having to interact in English specifically, but very few comments regarded specifically EMI setting. And then they were actually anxious not to lose attention to keep track of EMI class. And the comments regarded like listening, having to listen to long English lecture as a factor to like disconnect from the discourse, let's say. But let me talk about it more in the following slides. So as I have told you already, we had more comments regarding lack of anxiety in the EMI setting. So they were conscious, not anxious about making mistakes. So they were quite self-aware in terms of own errors regarding pronunciation. So they were worried about pronunciation errors a little bit, but not anxious about them. And they actually expressed a wish to be corrected by EMI teachers, which was not fulfilled. And only one comment regarding being worried about making errors at the exam. And in terms of lack of fear of negative evaluation, what I need to mention here is that they were allowed to carry out exams in Spanish too. So if they felt not confident enough, even in EMI setting, even if the lectures were carried out in English, they were allowed to take exams in Spanish if wished so. What's more, there was lack of language error correction in EMI in the classes, in the exams also. So they were not, they weren't fearing, they didn't fear the negative evaluation. And what is interesting here is there was lack of negative feedback, but actually there was lack of any feedback on the part of EMI teachers. And what I would like to highlight here too is that EMI teachers were mentioned as empathetic with students in terms of language errors. I believe they meant pronunciation errors, because both students and teachers in our setting share common linguistic background, so Spanish affected pronunciation of English. Okay, so and teachers not being too strict by correcting because of their English command. So general lack of anxiety was reported in our study. So our students would mention things like, I'm more worried about the content, doing an exercise on the blackboard badly, I would die of shame, but making an error in English, no. As far as the classroom interaction and EMI learning experience is concerned, there were much more positive comments than the negative ones. You can see that we had two categories in here. One was EMI-related language benefits and EMI learning and environment-related benefits. So they did mention quite a lot improved vocabulary or specific vocabulary improvement thanks to EMI setting and the opportunity to keep in touch with English offered by these courses. Also, improved fluency in English and they improved confidence to interact in English, and improved listening skills, and learning more than just the content, and some kind of involuntary learning or unconscious learning. And regarding the environment, specific environment, as I already mentioned, we have reduced groups, which are considered a very gratifying element. So they would mention better conditions in a small group, and the feeling of being more comfortable when interacting in the class due to the small group again, and teachers more personalized attention because of the small group and a good atmosphere. So here, the positive comments would include excerpts like, teacher speaks more slowly when there are fewer people, as nobody disturbs. They take their time to know whether you've understood, or at least to explain contents more comfortably. And another mechanical engineering student would mention, since we are a small group, we can be given more attention and more freedom to ask questions, which is important. On the downside, there were quite a couple negative comments, which included some demotivating elements in EMI, such as teachers whose discourse is disorganized or not clear enough to follow, lack of interaction, EMI lecture being a teacher's monologue, or missing information, lack of availability of class materials, or classes going a little bit too slowly, or some teaching practices being demotivating related to teachers' monologue. Okay, so again, a claim for more interaction taking place in the EMI environment. And then they did mention quite a lot EMI being a source of additional effort. So what they mentioned was that they had to get used to listening to English for a long time, which might be troublesome sometimes, and additional effort to follow EMI class. And they have to think in English as slowing you down, and some difficulties with understanding abstract concepts or too technical vocabulary, but only one comment for these problems were identified. So here the students would mention things like the lack of interaction is just teacher's discourse, so you just stay there listening, or a claim for more interaction in EMI environment. Teacher asking me a question directly motivates me more. I would like my teachers to focus more on us, to keep a closer watch on us, like asking us to give a solution to an exercise or ask somebody to carry it out on the blackboard, to take part more. Okay, so more participative EMI classes. So in conclusion, what in order to answer our research question, we answered our research question, we found strong ideal L2 self of our students with internalized need for English as foreign language, for being proficient in English as foreign language, and we found a limited role of O2 L2 self in this environment. With a not that pronounced effect of EMI on their anxiety. So what they reported was more lack of anxiety, that anxiety itself, and the personality trait would influence more than the language of instruction in here. So the findings of our study revealed that students' visions as speakers of English interacting with ease in all spheres of their future lives seem a fully integrated element of their ideal to self, whereas the impact of their auto self was found to be limited, as they hardly felt any external pressure to take EMI courses or to become proficient in English. So such interiorized need to master the L2, together with a positive learning experience that fosters classroom interaction and is supported by a general lack of EMI-related anxiety, drives students' motivation to engage in EMI courses. And smaller groups in EMI. Okay, there we go. I have mentioned this already. Okay. Smaller groups in EMI enable an L2-related anxiety-free atmosphere in class where students feel comfortable while they interact in English and are more prone to participate if let the chance. As revealed in the analysis, students highlighted the lack of anxiety in EMI. Even if even if they were concerned mostly with pronunciation errors, it did not lead to speaking anxiety, nor did it impede classroom interaction. Okay, and the overall evaluation of students' learning experiences regarding EMI courses was found to be positive, as the benefits they mentioned far outweighed the favorable comments, the unfavorable comments. Students were generally satisfied with their EMI courses and looked forward to taking up more in the incoming years. And the present study also allows offering some pedagogical implications, above all the need to foster more interactive classes in EMI. Okay, all right. As this is consistently demanded by the participants of our study. In this sense, teacher training is paramount to offer lecturers strategies and pedagogical tools to promote classroom interaction and help students to overcome the anxiety, any type of anxiety provoked by the use of English as means of instructions to courses. So the need for a stronger linguistic component in EMI courses remains unfulfilled, unfortunately. So there is the need to foster more interactive classes again. Okay, and this is all in terms of my own research. Now I would like to follow with some possible qualitative methodologies that might be used. So I'm more used to use focus groups interviews because they are quite comfortable for researchers. It is quite easy for the researchers to gather students in small groups. The groups between 5 and 8 students are enough to have a good focus group, but then there are some other possible qualitative methodologies I'd like to share with you. Some recent study by my colleague Hanne Ruthoft from the University of Navarre, for example, used narrative frames. So these are written story templates consisting of a series of incomplete sentences like prompts, and then blank spaces of varying lengths. And they are claimed to give like more freedom of response to the participants, and there is no need to transcribe. Then focus group interviews are quite common in my own among my own colleagues for my research group. So, for example, a study by Dois and Lasagavaster used focus group interviews combined with some semi-guided interviews, individual interviews with teachers. And then my own research is based on focus group interviews, focusing exclusively on students this time. You can use semi-guided interviews, so one-to-one interviews with participants, which are normally used with teachers. And then we have as well combination of focus groups plus interviews. There is a very interesting recent study by Dier Bote and Moncada Comas, our colleagues from Catalonia, who investigated teachers and students' perceptions on academic buoyancy in EMI. So how quite proficient students in EMI deal with any troubles in EMI learning. And then a recent study by Kari Sahan as well, 2025, focused on teachers and students' perceptions on EMI policy and motives to enroll in EMI programs in Turkey. So, focus groups and interviews used in combination. Then we have as well mixed methods possibilities, of course, so questionnaires and follow-up focus groups or semi-guided interviews used widely in research. The less common combination would be the vice versa. So focus group interview or semi-guided interviews, which give way then to questionnaires. So what the themes mentioned in focus groups or on the interviews like form the base of the questions of the questionnaire items then to be included in a broader survey. So this is an interesting inversion of the mixed methods. However, I haven't found any in our field. Then, of course, we have combined quantitative and qualitative items on the questionnaires, which are not exactly qualitative research as such, but combines a bit of qualitative element. So open-ended items, which might be then explored further to back up quantitative data. And I've got actually 2 studies in preparation with these methods, with follow-up focus groups or interviews. One done with my colleague Ana Bilbao Goyoaga from the same university, and one on my own, but I'm not going to give you more reference on that yet. And then we have classroom observation. This methodology is really interesting, but requires a lot of goodwill on the part of EMI lecturers to let us inside their classrooms. So classroom observation and recording of those classes, and then questionnaires and or interviews. There is a recent study by my colleagues Iratxe Serna Bermejo and David Lasagavaster, who investigated this way teachers and students' views on translanguaging in classes delivered in Basque as medium instruction and English as medium instruction by the same teacher. So interesting combination as well. And classroom observation might be very useful method to actually prove whether questionnaire studies or data gathered via questionnaire or focus group is then applied in practice if you research any topic regarding classroom practices in EMI. And then finally, we have longitudinal qualitative studies, which are really, really rare in our setting, with repeated interviews and focus groups. So some studies which deal with this methodology, applied this methodology, can be done in Jackson, who traced students' motivational trajectories from high school until higher education. And a recent study, which is still under review by myself and David Lasagaster, who traced those EMI students' motivation and anxiety I shared with you today throughout 3 academic years. I think I'm getting good with timing, so let me share some key takeaways and questions to consider that you might feel interesting. So what I would like to highlight here is that more qualitative research is needed, definitely, in our field. And since qualitative research as such is not suitable for any generalization, it should focus on the different contexts. It might allow for some comparison of different contexts, but shouldn't be generalized. So that's why the different EMI contexts could be compared by these methods. Then affective factors should be definitely addressed in more EMI research. And there is a need for better understanding of the EMI classroom dynamics and factors affecting EMI students' engagement. So another avenue for research is actually what exactly happens in EMI classrooms. This is a little bit more problematic as it involves more getting inside the EMI classrooms, but it might be definitely worth investigating. And then it would be worth investigating and sharing what comes from this EMI classroom observation, and to be able to share successful teaching practices. And then longitudinal studies are definitely needed to trace the development of EMI students. So we should consider the question: how does EMI affect learning, motivation, anxiety in the long run in different contexts? And then, of course, EMI versus non-EMI comparisons are of an interesting avenue. And also the hard science versus soft science, or the science versus humanities EMI subjects, students could be compared in order to better understand their needs as well. So the practices and needs and the different types of EMI courses offered, and how we can improve the teaching practices, making our EMI classroom respond to those students' needs and make EMI experience successful. This is actually all I had to say. I have here a special thanks to my colleagues David Lasagaster from the University of the Basque Country and Alberto Fernandez Costales, my colleague from the University of Oviedo, with whom I conducted my research in this area. And thank you for joining me today. I have some references. I know that you cannot probably see them well, but I will ask Mark to make this PowerPoint available in case you would like to have a look at any of those. And that's all. Thank you very much.